Good morning, everyone. It is still morning, just a long morning. Let me introduce my guest to my left, man who needs no introduction, New York City District Attorney Cy Vance. I want to thank him very much for being here today and thank him for all the good work that he and his office have been doing on this issue. To my right, another man who needs no introduction, Pat Foy, Chairman and CEO of the MTA. The issue today to talk about is the MTA. As everyone knows, or some people know who've been following, the legislative session is about to come to a close this week. I say that with mixed emotions. It's been a highly productive legislative session. I believe it's been one of the most productive legislative sessions in modern political history in terms of passing progressive measures. And we came to more agreements over the weekend, and it's going to be extraordinary what we accomplished. One of the main items we talked about during this legislative session was the MTA, and the legislature dealt with it extensively. The MTA is vital to downstate New York, the entire region. About 1/2 of the people in the state of New York use the MTA. Isn't that amazing? About 1/2 of the people. And there's no doubt that the MTA needs major reform and needed additional funding. The legislature passed unprecedented funding measures, so-called congestion pricing or central business district tolling, which is the first in the nation. It's revolutionary. It's not just a tolling mechanism, it's actually a traffic and volume control mechanism. It's going to encourage more people to use mass transit, and we are very excited about that. The MTA also raised fares, and the fare increases will be capped at 2%, but there's been a major investment by the riders and the taxpayers in the MTA. The central business district tolling added to the tolling some of the tax revenues that New Yorkers are paying. So now it's not just the riders that are subsidizing the MTA, it's the riders and the people of New York City. We also said from day one, just funding alone is not going to solve the problem. Throwing money at a problem very seldom solves it unless you have made the management reforms necessary to go along with the funding. I believe the MTA had a funding issue. I believe the MTA fundamentally has a management issue and has had it for many, many years. And the legislature said, we will agree to additional funding on behalf of the taxpayers, but we want to make the necessary reforms also to the MTA. And the legislature passed the most aggressive legislative reforms on the MTA probably since the MTA was created. We passed the debarment law. The MTA has a bad habit of always contracting with the same contractors, many of whom have failed in the past, but they just keep contracting with the same bad contractor. Why? Got me. Politics, incestuousness, revolving door, I don't know what it is. But the legislature passed a law saying you cannot do that anymore, period, or you violate the law. The legislature passed a law saying they have to use what's called design build, which means the MTA no longer designs the contract. They bid it out to a private developer, builder, who does the design and the construction. We've used it all across the state. It's worked extraordinarily well. We've used it on the old Tappan Zee Bridge, $4 billion, largest infrastructure project in the United States of America. It worked well. And I'll tell you what doesn't work well, when the MTA itself designs and builds a project. That does not work well. There are MTA projects like East Side Access that generations have come and gone, and that project still lives. We should all have the lifespan of the East Side Access Project. Forensic audit must be done by the MTA so we know where the money's going. We have a capital plan review board that'll do a real capital plan and not a political plan. And the MTA has to do a total reorganization plan by the end of this month, which is a fundamental reorganization of the institution. Not a convenient one, not one that doesn't rock any boats. They really need to reorganize that place ground up because it doesn't work. One of the most important operations for the MTA is public safety. And that's always one of the most important priorities, right? Run the trains and run the trains safely. And make sure people are safe when they're there. That's public safety. We can argue the numbers. Numbers say subway crime is down. Everyone agrees more needs to be done. And that's any New Yorker you ask, as well as the officials who do the numbers. And that's something that we want to address directly. And we're going to do that by adding an additional 500 officers to the MTA. From the 500 officers, 200 will be redeployed MTA officers. 200 will be additional NYPD officers who will be assigned to transit. And 100 will be bridge and tunnel officers who will be transferred to New York City Transit, because at the bridges and tunnels we now need fewer personnel because there are no longer tolls. It's now moved to electronic tolling. So the bridge and tunnel officers will be migrating to the MTA. That's a total of 200, 100, 500 officers. Three goals. Number one, improve public safety overall. Number two, address the assault on MTA workers, which is incomprehensible to me, but it is a true problem. It's getting worse. We've had 2,300 harassment incidents of MTA employees, 100 assaults, stabbings, punchings, violence against MTA employees. MTA employees, these are public servants. These are people who are doing a very difficult job. You think it's easy? Go spend a day working in a subway tunnel and tell me that it's an easy job. Spend a day on a subway train, driving, conducting it all day long, and tell me it's easy. 100 serious incidents, 1,200 incidents of harassment. We cannot allow it. They do not deserve it. They need more protection. The TWU, which is their union for many of the workers, has been complaining about it, and they are right. Public employees must be protected at work, and these attacks must stop. And the third issue is the issue of fare evasion, which we have to attack. Fare evasion is a growing, monetarily significant problem. Fare evasion 3 years ago cost the system about $100 million. The $100 million then went to $225 million. Now it's estimated to be close to $250 million, over $240 million. MTA just did a fare increase, and more people are evading the fare and getting on the trains without paying, or the buses without paying. That is not only a legal violation, it's unfair to everyone. You just increase the fare on riders, and people are then exploiting it by not paying the fare at all. That has to end. The fare evasion hotspots, the stations and bus routes that are the targeted locations for the highest incidence of fare evasions, correspond with the stations and bus routes where we've seen assaults on MTA workers. So there are 100 hotspots, 100 targeted locations, 50 subway stations, 50 bus routes, which will be the primary deployment for these 500 officers, which, as well as helping public safety overall, they will be reducing fare evasion and protecting the MTA workers from assault. So it does achieves many of our goals, and I think will make a significant difference and address issues that have been growing for a prolonged period of time. The New York City District Attorney has been extraordinarily helpful in this case. He understands the issue. He understands the problem. We are training personnel. We're getting more personnel in positions where they can deter fare evasion. We're also looking at design changes of the subway station access to the tracks. It can't be that a gate opens for a woman who has to use a stroller, and once the gate is open, it becomes a highway for everyone to walk through. So that design research has to be done. The district attorney has been working on this issue for years. He's actually agreed to work in partnership with the MTA and the New York City Police Department, and he's going to contribute $40 million to the personnel training, the deterrence, and video. We're going to experiment with video monitoring of the gates, as well as design alternatives for specifically the gates, but generally access to the tracks. So this was a multi-pronged effort. I want to thank New York City for their commitment for 200 additional police officers. I think it is well justified. I think it was needed for a long period of time. I think the MTA is right in redeploying MTA police and moving over the bridge and tunnel officers. I want to thank the New York City District Attorney for his overall cooperation, as well as for his contribution. I want to thank the TWU, the Transit Workers Union, Tony Utano and John Samuelson, for bringing this issue of assault on MTA personnel to the forefront. They've been talking about it for years, and they were right. And I want to thank the MTA for their cooperation. With that, let me turn it over to Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance, then we'll hear from Pat Ford.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and when the Governor and I spoke some months ago about working collectively to address some of the issues around fare evasion, of course I was absolutely happy to do so, and today's announcement culminates those discussions. Our office is a prosecutor's office which deals with criminal offenses. And with regard to the issue of fare evasion, what few people understand is that if handled as a criminal prosecution, that case comes into court, takes the time of court officers, judges, defense lawyers, prosecutors, court time, for $2.75 theft, but nothing happens in court. And that's not a criticism of the judges, is that there are no sanctions that actually are imposed. And what I saw happening was an expenditure, as the head of an agency, expenditure of a lot of money for very little criminal justice benefit. It has been my belief over my 10 years as district attorney that we ought to keep our eyes on a couple of things. Number one, racial disparity in prosecutions. And with fair evasion prosecutions, those that had previously been handled were overwhelmingly men and women of color. And secondly, doing something that works rather than continuing practices that don't. I have, for these low-level offenses, been focused on prevention. And I believe that sending people into court, just cycling in and out, isn't an answer to the situation. What the governor and I think, agree on is we should be focusing also serious efforts around deterrence and prevention, which is where our $40 million are designed to go. We will be funding, as the governor indicated, design rebuild in the stations so that there will be less ability for someone to get into the subways without paying the fare. The gates that have been not closely monitored, we're going to be redesigned so that those gates don't act as a funnel for people inside and out of the subway. And there is going to be, as the governor indicated, MTA personnel at many stations who are there to be a presence to deter people from going into the subway station. So what I'm investing in is an effort to continue to reduce fare evasion, focusing on what I think will work, which is the area of deterrence. In the last year, we've reduced our subway prosecutions, theft of service prosecutions, by 96%. You heard the governor say subway crime is down. I think that proves the point that prosecution and a more focused prosecution is actually, this is an opportune time to do that. So, Governor, I'm looking forward to working with Pat. I'm looking forward to working with you. I think this is an opportunity for our office to take funds. We have a very robust economic crime divisions in our office, and we've prosecuted foreign banks for literally billions of dollars for misdeeds that they have committed trying to move money illegally through the banking system. The state of New York has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of those cases, as has been the city of New York, and I'm proud that we can use $40 million that are the proceeds of criminal activity, not tax dollars, but criminal forfeiture, and take $40 million of those criminal proceeds and invest it in the New York City subway system in partnership with the governor and the MTA to focus on prevention, not just prosecution, because I believe that is a more appropriate way to address these issues. If you're an individual and you drive through an easy toll, you're not going to get arrested. You're going to get a ticket. There are thousands of people who double park their cars in New York City every day. They don't get arrested. They get a ticket. If you're driving down the West Side Highway at 65 miles an hour, you're not going to get arrested. You're going to get a ticket. And so it's unclear to me why, as a matter of equity, if you commit a $2.75 theft, you should be prosecuted, and at the same time, for that, incur thousands of dollars of costs, perhaps in each case that is prosecuted, to no material benefit that occurs in court that I can see. So it's a pleasure doing business with you, Governor, and it's not the last time, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again to the district attorney for all his efforts on this. Let's turn it over to Pat Ford.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, DA Vance. Good morning to all. First, Governor, I want to thank you for helping the MTA and New York confront this issue head-on and for leading the charge to mandate by law in the state budget passed in April a comprehensive plan to tackle the growing scourge of fare evasion. As the Governor just mentioned, last year the MTA lost about $225 million in revenue due to fare evasion, a disturbing trend that's increased significantly since 2017. Just through the first quarter of this year, 2019, fare evasion on subways and buses cost the MTA $65 million in the first quarter alone. At this rate, annualized fare evasion would reach approximately $260 million for the whole of 2019. These numbers come from a rigorous and continuous analysis done by dedicated teams of MTA staffers, New York City Transit staffers, who ride buses and monitor subway stations, but it's also evident to anyone who is paying attention as they move through the subway and bus system. You can simply stand in a high-traffic subway station and watch people stream through the emergency gates, avoiding the turnstile. Or sit on a bus and watch passenger after passenger walk past the bus driver or board through the back door and not pay. Make no mistake about it, this is a huge deal. The revenue the MTA loses every day to fare evasion is vital to maintaining and improving our subway and bus network for all New Yorkers. And it's simply not fair to the 8 million subway and bus customers who do pay their fare every day. We owe it to our customers to address this problem strategically and proactively, and with the governor's leadership, I think we've done that. We also owe additional protections to our employees, who are the front lines of moving New Yorkers every day. Adding the 500 uniformed officers to the system that the governor mentioned will help keep transit workers safe. And that's exactly what this new plan does. Now, as many of you know, fare evasion is especially high on our bus network. Out of the $225 million in lost revenues in 2018, 125 was from fare evasion on buses. In 2017, the highest fare evasion rate reported for other bus systems nationwide was 8%. By comparison, New York City Transit's bus fare evasion rate was more than 13% in 2017, and shockingly, more than 18% in 2018. So here in New York City, we're exceeding national trends to the point where last year, nearly 1 in 5 bus riders did not pay the fare. And it's important to note that subway and bus fares are not like the museums on Wednesdays. Fares are not suggested donations. Most New Yorkers would never dream of taking a Snapple every day from a deli and not paying for it. Yet too many customers think it's somehow different to skip the fare. It's not. We're grateful for this New York City's Fair Fares program, which right now is helping more than 50,000 low-income New Yorkers, and that number is increasing, to pay their fare. Students and seniors receive free or discounted fares. The growing problem of fare evasion is just one reason we're excited for our new Omni fare payment system, which will ultimately provide proof of payment on subways and buses. We currently have more than 1,200 Omni readers on buses and subway turnstiles on the 4, 5, and 6, the Lexington Avenue line at Grand Central Station, a couple of blocks from here. And by October 2020, Omni readers will be installed throughout the entire subway and bus network. The new system will not only make it far easier for customers to buy and pay their fare, it will also allow for all boarding on buses. That will help mitigate fare evasion because we'll be able to account for customers coming in through every door on the bus. But the growing trend of fare evasion needs to stop today. And that's what this plan is all about. It's not criminalizing fare evasion. This is about deterrence, not arrest. It's about asking the people who use the system to pay their fair share. Skipping the fare deprives the MTA of critical revenues it needs to run buses and trains, re-signal the system, expand service, clean stations, and do essential maintenance. The program's long-term goal is to achieve an effective fare evasion and worker protection program that allows us to improve the system for all customers while minimizing the resources we expend to combat this escalating problem. Addressing this problem is absolutely critical to giving New Yorkers the system they deserve, and it's critical to worker safety. The governor mentioned hundreds of attacks over a period of years on transit workers. Well, just yesterday, a transit worker was violently assaulted in Harlem, a cowardly and despicable act. We're making real progress in that goal of improving subways. Our subway system is getting better, hitting nearly 80% on-time performance last month, up nearly 20% in the last 18 months. That's an extraordinary achievement, but we're not anywhere near done. Addressing fare evasion will help us take our next step. Lastly, I want to note that we are working with Long Island Railroad and Metro-North leadership on uncollected fares on commuter rail, which is an issue on both the Long Island Railroad and Metro-North, and we'll be coming back with a program on that as well. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Questions?
You on-topic questions first.
I'm the chief leader. In conversations, Governor, with a number of rank-and-file TW members, what comes up is, and they don't want to use their names, is that it's an encounter with homeless folks that are there consistently over and over again, and they're on the front lines of having to wake people up to clean the cars. Can you talk about how these people, these officers being detached here, how would they be dealing with this? Is there going to be a reset regarding the homeless, which has been a long-term problem in the subways?
It has been a long-term problem, and I agree that's part of the problem here. The MTA specially funds outreach workers. Let me take a step back. I started by running not-for-profits to help the homeless. You help no one by letting people sleep on trains and lay on the floor in Grand Central Terminal. That is some misguided concept of altruism that this is a nice thing that we're doing for people, letting them sleep on the floor. Provide safe, clean, decent housing, provide shelters, provide the supportive services, et cetera. So the MTA has an outreach team that does just that. They are working to increase the efficiency of that because you have to be a trained personnel to do that encountering of the homeless individual and talk them through the process of going into a transitional shelter, et cetera. I know the New York City DA just worked with New York City in providing more funding to do that, but that's no doubt a part of the issue.
Maybe permitted a follow-up? One of the practical issues here is that, would you suggest that in a working transit system, because of the people and vulnerability to the system, that laying down on the subway platform is a different circumstance than laying down on a public street in terms of the standard of law enforcement involvement?
You know, I was the Attorney General a few years ago. I would have known that. Do you know, Mr. District Attorney, is there any difference legally? You lay on a platform, you lay on a street?
Well, I think the MTA has a responsibility and a sort of homeowner's right to conduct that's in the MTA. I think they are both situations which we should avoid and work to avoid, doing what the governor suggested and what we, as indicated by the governor, are doing. We just funded a program with the NYPD Transit to do just that. The difference between the subway and the street may be simply one of space also. Some person lying on a subway platform, it may put other folks in danger by trying to get around that person. But honestly, the same may apply on a city street. Bottom line is, the solution here is to get people out of those circumstances, and when they get out of those circumstances, to try to figure out how can we prevent them from going back to doing it again.
Can I just add, I'm not going to give the former Attorney General or the sitting DA of New York County any advice, but I will note the following. Subway platforms are very limited spaces. The stairs and the staircases and elevators and escalators are crowded. Having any person, whether it's homeless or not, lying on a platform or lying on a stairway creates a real hazard and peril. The DA is right that, of course, similar behavior on a Manhattan street or a street in any borough in the city is dangerous. I think it's particularly dangerous in a subway environment.
Yeah, let me just take a half step back, just to the context here, because we're talking about a number of different things. And I just want to make sure we separate. The fare evasion is on the increase. It's a monetary problem, et cetera. I agree with the district attorney that you double park, you don't get arrested. But there is a sanction. You double park, you get a ticket. You go 65 miles an hour on the West Side Highway, you get a ticket. And then you have to pay the ticket, or you go to renew your license and you can't get your license renewed. So there is a sanction. There is a financial penalty. Not a criminal, civil. But there is a sanction to not doing it. And New Yorkers are smart. If I can do this, if I can double park and I'm never going to get a ticket, maybe I'll double park. So the sanction has to be there, and the enforcement of the sanction, which is basically the Traffic Transit Adjudication Bureau, that has to work. You can't evade a fare, try to deter first, change behavior, but if you evade a fare, you get a ticket, and you have to pay that ticket, and that's a sanction. That is different than truly criminal activity. You assault, you stab an MTA worker. That is an assault, and you should be prosecuted for that crime, period. You're a young thug on a subway train that kicks an elderly woman in the head and then posts it on the internet for people to see. That is an assault. That is a crime, right? And let's remember in all of this, the law is still the law, right? And it has to be enforced. So there are different categories that we're talking about here. Homeless people are really even a separate circumstance because they need special assistance, special help. They tend to congregate in the subways for obvious reasons. They always have. But we have to do a better job of reaching them. That's not an MTA employee's function. That's the MTA homeless outreach worker, which, by the way, they spend millions on this program. How well it's working, I don't know. The district attorney just provided New York City with millions more. So that's a third category. Please.
I just want to say I agree with the governor. There should be a sanction for evading the fare. And it is not my intent to leave the impression that's not the case. But it should be, as I think the governor and I talked about in one conversation, it should be proportionate. It's my view that arrest, except in instances where there is a clearly identified public safety issue, that's not proportionate. And that we should be focusing instead on deterrence and stopping the behavior and providing the mechanisms physically so it can't be done with the same ease that it's being done today.
Andrew?
On the fare evasion, I'm wondering how many of these new enhanced stations have, like the 110th Street on the BC, the 23rd Street on the F, where the gates are so low, we're getting reports that people just reach over, open the gates, and go on in. Was there a mistake made in the redesign of a dozen or half a dozen stations that actually contributed to the problem?
Well, part of the funding that DA Vance is providing is going to be used for looking at increased gate heights and design of turnstiles and other apparatus around the country and around the world. The turnstiles that are used in the New York City subway system there's a certain amount of play, especially as they've been in place for a period of time, and there is an ability for some riders to be able to manipulate it. All those things, Andrew, are going to be looked at, and that is one use of the $40 million that the DA is committed to this effort.
But if you're redesigning brand new stations that were just designed, does that not acknowledge that there was a mistake in the design to begin with?
Well, if you're talking about the enhanced station initiative, in most cases the turnstiles weren't replaced, right? The existing turnstiles were put back in use. But the design has to be looked at, and again, that's going to be a use of a portion of the DA's $40 million.
Ms. Kramer?
Mr. Cuomo, what role will the video surveillance cameras play in deterring fare evasion?
It's a new technology that the MTA is going to deploy and experiment with, frankly. Part of the deterrent is you have a person in front of the gate. Is there a way to use a video monitoring camera to help accomplish surveillance? It said it hasn't been deployed yet, it hasn't been designed yet, but it's something that they're going to research and deploy.
So my question is this, if you go through the toll plaza and don't pay the toll, the camera takes your license plate is on record, you get a ticket. If somebody goes through the turnstile and doesn't pay the toll, how do you identify that person and send them the ticket?
Well, it could take your picture, run your pic. Well, first of all, just put your picture up on the website. Everybody would say, that's Marcia Kramer. I don't know. They have to design the system. That's the whole point.
But, Marcia, what I could say,
I think it's sort of interesting to know how you're going to go after them. How is it going to determine?
Well, it could even signal an alarm, right? It could make a noise. Go ahead, this.
I think the MTA will also be much more aggressive with signage, and so that where there are these entrances to the subway, it will be clear that, if you try to get in without paying the subway fare, there's going to be a record of it, and there may in fact be a person standing before that exit gate to make sure you don't go in. So I think people's awareness that they can't do this without being seen is important, like in anything else we try to deter.
Just one question, what would you define if you get a ticket? Like, what do you think is reasonable to pay if you don't pay your $2.75 fare?
I don't know. That would have to be set, I guess, by the MTA board, or if it's not in the law.
These turnstile jumpers don't care if they're getting hauled into court. What do they care about a $60 ticket? They'll get 20 of them. What happens then?
Well, if you don't pay a ticket, there can be, it goes on your administrative file, so then when you go to get a driver's license or register a car, those tickets all come up.
But these city people, most of them don't have cars, that's why they're taking the train. So you have all these turnstile jumpers, they don't care about being arrested, they're gonna pay a fine?
Well, it's not only driver's license, right? It's also ID cards that non-drivers may use, for instance, to access public buildings or public benefits. There's clearly an effect of getting a summons for theft of services, in this case for not paying the fare, and there are consequences to do it that both drivers and non-drivers will feel.
Can you provide more detail about bus fare evasion? How is that going to be more strongly enforced? Is this where the police come in a more strong way? Like, will we end up seeing more officers at bus stops?
Yeah, I think there's three answers to the question. The 500 additional officers that the governor described are going to be split. I'm not going to say exactly in what percentage between subways and buses. I think that's important. And additionally, there are currently Eagle teams on buses, MTA employees. Many of them are retired police officers from the NYPD and other police forces. We're increasing the number of Eagle teams. And then thirdly, in October of next year, Omni, the new fare payment system, is going to be throughout the entire subway system and bus system. We believe that the Omni rollout, and it's already, we believe, had an effect on Staten Island where usage has been high. Omni was rolled out on the Lexington Avenue line 4, 5, and 6 from Grand Central to Barclays Atlantic Avenue, and was also rolled out on Staten Island buses. We believe that we're seeing an impact on Staten Island. It's too early to tell. But Omni will be part of the solution once it's rolled out across the entire system October next year.
But yes, you could also see police on bus routes, on buses, or police in that area, or police cars that can be called by the MTA bus driver. Yes?
The 200 additional police officers, I mean, obviously Mayor de Blasio isn't here. Is that money coming from the city budget? Or
City.
those new officers?
City.
The city's paying for it.
City's paying for the NYPD officers.
And how extensively did you talk to Mayor de Blasio about this problem?
Our offices talked extensively.
Last one, guys.
The other 200 officers that are MTA reassigned but not from bridges and tunnels, where are they coming from? And also, Governor, what does success look like for you in this field? Like, in how many months do you want to see what numbers go down?
Well, I think this is a sort of evolutionary process. We're doing this. Let's see what results we get, what works, what doesn't work. There's no doubt that these are major problems, and they have been for a long period of time. We've been talking about them for years. And at one point, do something, right? Talk, analyze. I think this, I think that. Good. Now do something. So we're doing something. Let's see how well it works. If it works well, we'll scale it up. If it doesn't work, we'll try something different. I don't have any specific time frame in mind.
And then the 200 cops that are being reassigned from not bridges and tunnels that are MTA.
Where are they? Do you know where they're coming from?
Yeah, there's 100, Governor, that are coming out of BTOs, and Chief Monahan at the MTA Police Department is going to reassign 200 MTA police officers. Obviously, MTA police are at Grand Central and Penn Station and Atlantic Terminal already, and there'll be redeployment of those forces.
Now remember, we've also supplemented those same areas with New York State Police. So
Are they prepared to work in the subway environment, those officers?
they
Yes.
are they are MTA police officers.
Have you developed a list of places, the 50 subway stations and the 50 bus
The
routes?
100,
Where
yes. Do we have the list? Is the list public?
List is not public, Governor.
Generally,
List
where
is
are they
not public.
concentrated?
I don't know.
Generally, where are they concentrated?
Well, look, I think it's fair to say that among the stations in Manhattan, since DA Vance is with us, that have high levels of fare evasion would be Union Square, Penn Station, Grand Central, and others, and they will be randomly assigned to subway and bus routes where we think they can have the most effect in reducing fare evasion.
Yeah, a little of this, you don't want to say, if you're a fare evader, don't go to this station, go a block away, right? So there are a number of targeted stations. There can be some movement in the stations. And as Pat and the DA said, these are the high-volume fare evader stations. Also, there's a high correlation with the assaults on MTA workers in these stations. But we don't want to give anyone a roadmap to say, if you want to be a fare evader, this is the station you shouldn't go into.
Is there any research about whether or not there's a co-relationship with homelessness in those? You came up with two indicia. Is it conceivable that homelessness and public disorder could also be part of the overall environment?
It's a good question. I don't know, but it's something we should look at. Yes?
We're gonna, in terms of the video surveillance being used to issue some type of summons or notice to a fare beater, how soon would that be rolling out? Because a lot of the MTA stations already have video cameras there.
You're a step ahead. They're going to research how to use video cameras. There is no set use for the video camera. No one has said the video camera can issue a ticket. It's not like a speed camera. How can you use video? Can it alert the person, the clerk in the booth? Can it make a siren noise so any police officer on the platform can turn around and see who's walking? That's what they're going to look at. But there is no set use yet for the video, and there is no set design, Andrew's question before. Well, what should the gate look like? And how do you meet whatever code standards you have to meet with the gates, but don't make the gate so easy to walk through, which is what some of the funding from the district attorney will be used to do, and is the right and obvious question. And if they did put in gates that are even easier to get through, that was obviously a mistake.
We're gonna take a break and then do.
On topics.
There's one more from Pat. Pat, what do the Eagle teams do on the buses now? I mean, do they grab somebody and give them a ticket? Or?
Yeah, Rich, they'll do a couple of things. Obviously, they'll be sitting generally, Eagle teams are comprised of two people, in many cases retired police officers. They'll observe whether the fare has been paid. On, for instance, select bus service where you'll get a receipt, they'll check as people are leaving the bus whether they've got a receipt. And if the evidence is there, they'll issue a theft of service summons.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. District Attorney. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Pat.